Ladies and gentlemen, there is a new buzzword in the health and fitness space.
VO2 max.
VO2 max.
VO2 max.
VO2 max.
Yes, today we are talking about VO2 max, and this is a video I have been looking forward to making because there's been lots of talk about VO2 max being linked to longevity and potentially a longer lifespan, and I really wanted to investigate this and learn more about it for myself and see if all the health experts were right on this one. So today I will be going through a few things: what VO2 max is, why it's important for our health, and whether it can in fact help you live longer. So let's get right into it. Hello everyone, it's Kamini from Longgame.haf. Welcome back to another week on the channel. If you're new here, I put out a new video every Friday to help educate you in health in some way. So subscribe and check out some of my other videos while you're at it. So VO2 max is actually a unit of measurement that is used quite often in the exercise science space to measure athletic performance or fitness levels in general. And VO2 max stands for maximal oxygen uptake. This is the maximum amount of oxygen that your body can use during intense exercise. So when you breathe in air, there is oxygen in that air, and essentially what the VO2 max is telling us is how quickly we can take that oxygen from the air into our lungs, get it into our blood, and then pump that oxygen to our muscles so that the muscles can function to the best of their ability. And like all trends, this is something that's actually been around for a long time, but over the past few years, the technology in wearable fitness trackers like smartwatches have led to more of us being able to estimate our VO2 max. And I say estimate because that's all the watches can really do. These smartwatches can measure your heart rate and pace when you are doing exercise, and they use that information to essentially guess your VO2 max. But some of these watches, like the Garmin ones in particular, have been shown to be quite accurate. And of course, now we seem to be hearing on some popular podcasts that VO2 max is linked to longevity and is something that we should be paying attention to if we want to improve our health. So VO2 max is measured in millimeters of oxygen per kilogram of body weight per minute. So the number will look something like this. And essentially, the higher this number is, the more oxygen your body is able to use to help you take part in higher intensity exercise for longer periods of time. So how do you actually measure your VO2 max? Well, I already mentioned that smartwatches and fitness trackers can now estimate VO2 max, but they won't be 100% accurate. The gold standard and most accurate way to measure VO2 max is through something called cardiopulmonary exercise testing, also known as CPET. This is usually done in a lab setting and under medical supervision, and it's usually reserved for scientific research or for professional athletes. During this test, a person will wear a mask, and this mask is connected to a machine that measures the amount of oxygen and carbon dioxide in their breath. The person will then need to perform some exercise, so they'll usually be on a treadmill or exercise bike, and the intensity of exercise will increase until they cannot go anymore. All this information will then be used to determine VO2 max through a formula. Don't ask me the specifics on that formula, I leave that to the exercise scientists. But that's just for your information. Now I want to get into why VO2 max is important. The main reason we should care about this number is because it's a good indicator of how your cardiovascular health is going. Now, if you have seen my other videos, you will know I talk about heart disease quite a bit, and that's because it's the leading cause of death in the developed world, and cardiovascular health is of course directly tied to heart disease. So if you have a higher VO2 max, then you tend to have a lower risk of heart disease. VO2 max also impacts on your overall endurance. If you think about the fact that VO2 max is telling you how much oxygen you can get to your muscles to fuel the exercise or movement that you're doing, then it makes sense that the higher this number is, the longer you can go on doing exercise before feeling exhaustion and fatigue. It's not just endurance though, it's also exercise intensity. A higher VO2 max means you can do higher intensity exercise for longer as well. When it comes down to it, Your muscles need oxygen because it's part of the process of making energy in the muscles. The amount and the speed of oxygen reaching your muscles will determine how fit you essentially are, and that is exactly what this VO2 max value is telling you. And it's not just athletic ability and fitness that a high VO2 max helps with, it has wider health implications too. There are some studies that seem to suggest a higher VO2 max can reduce the risk of not just heart disease, but also type 2 diabetes, obesity, and other chronic conditions. This doesn't really surprise me though, because if you have a high VO2 max, it's likely that you are exercising regularly and working on cardiovascular health in some way. And it's rare that you have a high VO2 max with no training. Now, we all know by now that exercise has many health benefits and can prevent chronic disease, so again, not surprising that people with a high VO2 max seem to have good health outcomes. But I want to focus on the claims that high VO2 max is important for longevity and can increase lifespan. These claims are what have brought the idea of VO2 max into the forefront very recently, so I just wanted to investigate this a bit more. Now, the research that I ran into was quite promising. This study here from 2018 was particularly good because it had a 46-year follow-up. So they had a group of 5,000 men who were middle-aged, so they were about 40 to 59 years old. They then checked in on them a few times over 46 years to see how their health was going. Now, these men in the study, they did not have any heart disease to start with, and the study found that the men who had higher VO2 max in midlife, which is the age group that these men were in, did in fact live longer. The men who had the top 5% of VO2 max values ended up living about 5 years longer than those who had the lowest 5%. And another study was this one that Peter Attia has actually talked about in one of his podcasts. This included over 100,000 participants who were again in that midlife category with age. They were about 53 years old on average. The participants did the treadmill test to find VO2 max levels, and then they were all ranked amongst each other. They were split into groups based on their VO2 max, as you can see here. So if someone was elite, they had a VO2 max in the top 5%. And now what they found was a clear trend when it came to all-cause mortality. Now, just a side note, if you are ever going through research and run into the term all-cause mortality, it just means death from any cause. So this chart here is showing that the higher the VO2 max, the lower the risk of death. And the interesting thing here is the group with the lowest VO2 max, they are quite far away from the rest of the group. They had a much lower chance of surviving by the 10-year mark. And the reason I like this study is because it shows that if you are someone who has a low VO2 max, you have the most to gain by making the slightest improvement to your cardiovascular fitness. By just moving to the below average group, which is quite achievable, you can improve your risk profile by a huge amount. And considering that these studies were focused on people in midlife, it shows it really isn't too late to start improving fitness levels. So from what I found, yes, there seems to be some research that shows us if you have a higher VO2 max, you tend to live longer. But that just tells me that if you have a lifestyle that includes fitness, then you are likely to live longer, which isn't new knowledge. VO2 max may be the new buzzword going around, but it really is just another way to say something that is quite common knowledge. Your cardiovascular health is hugely important to health outcomes later in life. This means you need to take care of your heart. And how can we do that? By increasing the amount of cardiovascular fitness that we do. We need to do exercise that can increase our heart rate, whether that is just going for a walk or running or whatever works best for you. So hopefully that has cleared the air about this whole VO2 max thing. It's not as complicated as it sounds, and it's not as new of a concept as some people are making it out to be. If you like to track these kinds of numbers and find that they are good at motivating you to do more exercise, then maybe getting a fitness tracking device like a smartwatch could be useful. But personally, if you're just trying to get healthier, just focus on doing the exercise and the work that will help you. You don't exactly need to track and monitor these numbers. But if you are curious about how you can increase this VO2 max, I will be doing a video focusing on that very soon. So subscribe to make sure that you don't miss that one. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to leave a comment. Give a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. I will see you next week, and as usual, keep playing the long game.
Mhm.